Hey friends, welcome to this episode of the Cutting Room Floor podcast of Grace Church, where we talk about all the stuff that didn't make it into the message or, kind of whatever else we want to talk about. My name is Larry. I'm one of your pastors. I'm joined by another one of our pastors, Taylor Brown.
Hey.
So good to be back together.
Good to be here.
It was Wes and Sherry last week.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I was in Ohio, and you continued the series Essentials for us this week. You were up at the Cape campus. I was up at Central, and Pastor Sherry was up at the Shores, and we love the feedback we've been getting from everybody about this series. It's a little different for us, kind of just marching through one book,
right?
And a little less topical, but just
and through one of Paul's letters too. That's like a unique. I'm not sure we've done one other one through one of Paul's letters, but this we've done
have been
James
before I got here.
We've done James, but yeah, this is different for us too, of kind of walking through some of this. Paul tends to repeat himself in his writing, and so but it's neat. It's emphasizes some of the themes I think he wants to his original audience to understand. So
we were having this conversation in teaching team, like we try not to like overlap with each other too much, and that's one of the beautiful but hard things about the way we put sermons together, because you have the next person up and you're trying not to. It's so hard with this letter. I compared it to Paul's just kind of circling the airport. Like he wants to make sure he's got
a great analogy.
Everything done before he lands the plane. And that's causing him to retrace some territory.
Yes.
In a little bit. So you started with a story that really made me chuckle, and I didn't have a chance to tell you about it till just now. You were talking about losing the Virgin Mary. Our special guest today.
She was in my bag still, and I told Larry before. I said, "Larry, Mary's still in there." He's like, "Get her out, put her on the table." So Mary's joined us for the filming of this.
So y'all couldn't find Mary for your little people nativity, and it made me chuckle because somehow the Frank family, before we moved, we ended up with 2 little people nativity sets.
Okay,
and Brittany went to donate one of them to a thrift store, and somehow Mary got left out of that. So we have 2 Marys, and somebody somewhere else has a little people nativity that they're missing Mary from as well.
So this whole time, I could have called you guys and been, if I would have just told somebody about our Mary crisis, I would have gotten another one.
I could have hooked you up.
Oh my gosh.
We have 2 of them, and it's been fun listening to my girls try to as they play with it at Christmas time, try to dramatize around the fact that there's 2 Marys. Like they have ways of explaining this.
Yes. Well, now with the Marvel's The Multiverse, I mean, it's possible. That's Mary from Earth 616.
What do you do with that? All right, that's a whole nother.
That's all of it. Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
It's a great story, but what did it have to do with the sermon?
Yeah, so the story was funny, and it was brand new. Like it was literally just a couple weeks ago that I found Mary in the center console, and so really for me the theme of it was the whole time Mary was with me in this kind of hidden place in my car that I could not find. Mm-hmm. And what I was doing is I was looking at all the obvious places. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about my tendency with God, and it's just that. It's that when I look for God or I look for evidence of him, I tend to look in the obvious places. Like the places I can see, the places that are kind of within reach. I don't often consider in the moment how he's working and he's moving in places that are hidden, in places that I can't see.
That's great.
And so for me, it was just kind of this reminder. And when we look back, we see it. Like for me, I can look back on something a year ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago and go, oh, I see how like this thing that God was doing then actually was it made sense then. But in the moment, we don't do that. We don't ever see it. We look for God to give us the immediate out or the immediate download of wisdom in our brains. And so for me, this was just a great reminder of, God's in the hidden places. Yeah. He's working in those places we cannot see, those places we haven't considered him actually to be able to work.
Yeah. And don't you think God does some of his best work in those places?
Absolutely.
We're slow to recognize that in the hidden places or the dark places.
Yeah.
But looking back, I can see. So I heard a preacher in Ohio last week while I was teaching at United Seminary. He preached on Revelation 7, the number that no man could number and all that stuff. But he was talking about going to the movies. And before you can see the preview of coming attractions, all the good stuff that's coming, it has to get dark first.
Oh,
and I was like, "Oh, come on,
that's good,
like,
right there."
So
I'm gonna take a note. Hold on, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I know, right? No, that is. I'm copywriting that.
That's good.
I'll give him credit this time on the podcast. After that, it's mine.
Good.
But like in the darkness, we get to see what's coming of God's greatest show offs and show ups.
Yeah.
But it's got to get dark.
Yeah.
First, and so you played with this idea, and we've done it in all of the messages in the series so far, of what the world's definition of the essential is versus God's definition, and that's really where this is at.
Absolutely,
The world is like the blessings and the butterflies and rainbows, and streets paved with candy canes.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. The blessing, the whole idea. That's what you're right. The whole idea of the hidden place and God working there. It's so counterintuitive to what our world would define blessing as.
Right.
So our world defines blessing. I kind of named this in the sermon. I think by two major things. Like our world would say we're blessed when we gain physical things,
right,
and then when our circumstances are good,
right.
Like kind of those two realities. When we're living in that, then we're blessed.
Yeah.
And that's what our world would say.
Yeah.
And so it seems impossible to our world that like life could be miserable or we could have little and still be blessed by God. But then when you look at the whole narrative of Scripture, it says the exact opposite. It says that actually, while our bodies are dying, or actually when we do have little, or when we're in persecution or struggle, God is still moving. God is still at work. And in fact, we are still being blessed with spiritual blessings from Him in those moments. And so, it was a fun play on that. And I think our world, I mean, we joked about looking up #blessed.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can just see, it's nobody, it's rare, very, very rare that you ever see on social media a post of someone saying #blessed and they talk about how life is terrible, but they're still blessed, or how they have nothing and they're still blessed.
Yeah.
Like it's always, most of the time, it's always physical gain or circumstances firing on all cylinders.
So, serving primarily at Central Campus, where we see a lot of homelessness and poverty and people stuck in addiction, I was convicted of that writing this message because my big blessing for the week that I had texted out to my friends and said, I'm so blessed, is I got moved to a different seat on the plane. It was not an exit row, but there was a gap between first class and the main cabin. I had unlimited leg room.
Yeah, you stretch the legs out.
Like, Jesus loves me best. And then I'm like, this is like the most first world blessing thing I've ever said. When I have folks that I serve down at Central that know how blessed they are when they're sleeping in a bush somewhere. And it took me getting unlimited leg room to be like, well, I'm blessed.
Right, exactly.
Don't get me wrong, it is a blessing. Like,
exactly.
A big guy on a plane is not always fun. And that was good.
Yes.
But
No.
It took that for me to go, oh, I'm blessed.
Yes, and don't we do this all the time? At least I do. I won't say you. I won't. I want to accuse you.
Hey,
of
hold
this.
on now.
Yeah, I want to accuse you of this. I'll just talk about me. Like I do this all the time. Like even this morning. So pumpkin's back. I joked this week. Pumpkin spice is back.
I can't even with you, pumpkin spice.
This is where I'm pretty basic. Is my love of pumpkin. So Dunkin' today, pumpkin's back, and so I love their pumpkin muffin. So I stopped there before I came here. And the line was long, and I went inside, and like there's just chaos, obviously, because they were just busy. And it took a little longer, and for 38 and a half seconds, I found myself getting really frustrated.
Oh yeah,
of I gotta film this podcast, Pastor Larry, and they need to hurry up. And then when you zoom out and think about it, I have the resources to be able to go and buy this coffee and buy this muffin.
And be bougie with your pumpkin spice.
And be basic bougie with my pumpkin spice and enjoy it. And yet here I am grumbling at perspective is everything.
Yep.
And one of the things that was so convicting in this sermon, you named it, for you and it was for me too, was to talk about there are a lot of things where I will count those as blessings, and hear me. Should we? Yeah, they are. They are. Well, I try to really reiterate that, both with physical and circumstances. And I hope it came across that way. Of we're not saying that the physical things God gives us aren't blessings, or that life firing on all cylinders or good circumstances are not blessings. It's just beyond that. It's just bigger than that. Because if it's just those two, then it diminishes God to only when I get stuff and only when life is good that I'm being blessed.
Reduces God to a genie.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because nobody wishes for hard times when they're dealing with the genie.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, and I think when we brought in the Sermon on the Mount and talked about the Beatitudes, that shows the upside down nature of God's kingdom. Because you know what I'm saying? Blessed are you if your 401k is all set.
Right.
No, blessed are the poor in spirit. I'm like, okay, wait. Yes. And there's this whole one, you're blessed in those circumstances, but it's also this announcement by Jesus that if you're any of these things, you're blessed because I'm here now, and your role is about to be reversed.
Yes,
because the poor in spirit are going to find richness in me, spiritual richness, and those of you who are mourning now, you're going to celebrate. So it's that the blessing comes in the kingdom, even in those hidden places, the dark places.
Absolutely, those Beatitudes, and we did a sermon series on these, by the way, a couple years ago. It's called Beyond Happy. So those, if you're listening, you're like, oh, I want to dive in more into those. Look that up on our website, on our app.
I'll have to do that.
It was a really good sermon series.
Okay.
But one of the things that I love about that intro is it's an announcement of there's a savior here, there's a Messiah here, and so you can be blessed in these places. And I view it as kind of like it's almost like a roll call. Where you like when the substitute teacher comes in to your class,
Bueller,
and
Bueller. Sorry,
Bueller, or even a teacher, and they come in, and the first thing they do is kind of take roll to see who's there. For me, it's almost like when Jesus does this, he's announcing his presence and power that comes, but also it's almost like this: hey, if you're mourning, come on, if you're poor in spirit, come on.
Right.
If you're being persecuted because of righteousness, come on. It's almost this like roll call of, and what a beautiful like kind of first prominent moment of his ministry, because those were the people he hung out with. Those are the people he ministered to.
What
those
does that
were who
tell
he
us
came
about
for.
the character and nature of God?
Yes,
That he favors those who are broken and poor in spirit.
Yes. So it's this beautiful picture of one of Jesus' power and presence, but also of like, hey, if you fit any of these, come on, let's go.
So we broke that down further. You did talking about blessings beyond our circumstances and how that plays out. And you talked about your trip to Nicaragua, and I know you were really pressed for time on that part. So you say more about how that really showed you that blessings go beyond your present circumstances.
Yes. So this community of La Cruz, it's located right next to the garbage dump in the city of Esteli, Nicaragua. And this is a community of people who have lived there for generations, live in extreme poverty. And this place, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So let me say that first. So there's a mix here of there are some families and followers of Jesus who live there, who helped plant a church right by there. But there are also some not good people there who are up to not good things, whether that be to steal, whether that be trafficking, whether that be other things. I mean, there's a malicious intent of people there. There's also people who don't live with joy; they live with extreme bitterness and sadness and frustration and grief. And so there's this mixed community there. And when you go, see, we got connected with them. Let me pause here. We got connected with them years ago. There was a preschool that we used to kind of support and administer to. It was actually before I really started getting involved and going to Nicaragua. So I'm not too clear on that part of the story. But there was a school that we got connected with that was right nearby there. We got introduced with this community that was kind of adjacent to it. And so on the trip that I went on, we were no longer supporting and directly connected with the school, but we kind of had some loosely connected relationships in La Cruz. So we still knew some people there. And so our team goes, and you kind of drive up, up the road and kind of get up there, and you just all of a sudden see this massive trash heap. And so we're getting ready to get out, and I think I shared this in the sermon. One of the people who were there kind of just cautioned me and said, hey, the goal of this is not for us to kind of teach them some things and help and help them out with poverty. Like the goal is right now is for us to learn from them. And that's all they said. And they kind of got out. And so you have, kids running around the trash piles playing. You have, just people kind of working, digging through trash, looking for items that maybe they can sell or trade or whatever. And then when you start talking to the people, because trash heaps like up here, and then like kind of if you go down a path down here, it's kind of a lot of their homes, right? And then back in there was this church they were building, and there's a pastor, and we talked to this pastor, and we were like, well, so tell us about how you got here. And so I think he was originally from Miami, and long story short, he felt like God distinctly called him to La Cruz.
Wow.
To that place. And what still gives me chills is the years that he was describing his story were the years that we had been connected with La Cruz and had been praying for this exact thing.
Oh, wow.
That God would be present in this place, that God would impact this community of people, that God would change lives for these people.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like his call story is like, yeah, I feel called right to this place. So he built this church like right in the middle of this place. But in the midst of all that, it wasn't like he was the only joyful person there and that's it.
Yeah.
We met so many people who just live with a spirit of joy and content and peace and not wanting. I mean, did they want? I'm sure they did. Like if you offered them, a certain thing, they would probably take it. But it was not this like, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to be content. I'm not going to be satisfied until I get out of this place. It's very much like, no, God is here.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm at peace.
Yeah.
And it messes with you in a good way.
Yeah.
This very American mindset of like, wow, if I lived here, I'd be so ticked. I'd be so miserable. I had nothing. And no, these people were so happy. The followers of Jesus. Let me specify. The followers of Jesus there.
Yeah.
We're so happy, and we're just so satisfied. And it wasn't like a grit your teeth and bear it kind of like, I'm so blessed, you know, but you're really miserable on the inside. It was not that. It was very much like showing us into their homes, and showing off their neighborhood and showing off this church that was going in there. And I don't know, it was just a beautiful, the whole story is a beautiful testament to God's grace.
Yeah.
Of him impacting that community. But then for me personally, it was this very convicting thing of like, it's not all about the stuff and the circumstances that blesses you.
Yeah.
It's something deeper. It's something once again hidden and unseen.
Yeah, and there's something in that when you're operating as a follower of Jesus in the will of God. Like finding that blessing and everything.
Yeah.
The story I shared at Central, I wasn't here when Hurricane Ian happened, but I spent quite a bit of time in New Orleans after Katrina. Smaller hurricane, but caused way more damage. Like $200 billion worth of damage. All the way back in 2005 because the levees broke. And no one expected that. So we were doing cleanup and the lower Ninth Ward was trashed, you know, and people were left with nothing. And that was a hard reality for a teenager from a well-off family to walk into. I'm like, how are these people doing this? And we got plugged in with a church that was meeting under a circus tent in an abandoned Walmart parking lot. And the story behind it was even cooler. The pastor there, they had just moved their church into a new building. It was utterly destroyed. Jeez. And him and his family had just bought their dream home. And they were told, you don't need flood insurance because you're outside of the flood zone. Oh, my gosh. That was true if the levees wouldn't have broken.
If the levees would have broken,
House is utterly destroyed, and now insurance isn't going to cover the flooding part because he didn't have flood insurance. So he got his family out before the storm, and he found himself... Pastor Randy, living in his minivan in this abandoned Walmart parking lot. And he said he had this whole woe is me, like, Lord, you had blessed me with so much and now I have nothing. What am I supposed to do?
Right.
And he felt God ask him, like, so when you were so blessed before, what were you doing? I was preaching the gospel. Why would it be any different now?
Wow.
So he found this old Coleman camping stove, started serving soup out of the side of his minivan. And God blessed that so much that these like Red Cross comes in and Samaritan's Purse and whatnot. And they're like, we just want to partner with you because you're running this. So they bring in the tent, they bring in medical folks and whatnot. And to this day, those are some of the best worship services I've ever been a part of. Because it was just people recognizing my house is gone. I'm living in a parking lot right now, but there is breath in my lungs, and the Lord chose to wake me up this morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was one of those moments for me, like, oh, this goes way beyond my circumstances.
Absolutely.
Way beyond.
Absolutely.
So I was so glad that I had that experience.
That's incredible.
With Randy incredible. And that church there.
That's incredible. Yeah. We experienced, you talked about Ian, we experienced that a little bit thinking back when we were running the store, our distribution site here with Ian. There was so many times where I would greet people one by one as I walked in and said, hey, it's so good to see you. How are you doing? And more than a dozen, probably close to 50 in total, people looked at me and went, well, I'm upright. I'm alive.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. Through tears, saying that. And it's like, you know what, there's a little, like, and it goes along with that same idea of
these people
these people had lost their homes. Yeah.
This is hard, but I'm here.
I'm here, upright.
And I remember, like I wasn't here yet, but I was keeping up on all of you guys. Like, was that not one of the best worship services that y'all ever had? Like,
top
no
5.
power in the building.
Yeah, top 5.
And I saw pictures from Central the same way. Like, there's no power. We don't have our screens and electric guitar and whatnot, but we're here and we have a God that loves us and has brought us through.
Yeah, that was a top 5. I mean, all time. Like whenever my chapter here ends and another chapter begins, that will go down as. Like when you go like, what were some of the most impactful, memorable moments? That's going to be one of them. I mean, that service was just beautiful because it was this. I mean, you really you strip down the physical, you strip down the circumstances, and that's what we were left with. So it was beautiful.
I remember I checked in with y'all. All like the common response I got from everybody I checked in with was like, nobody knew how it was going to go. Like, who's going to show up, what's going to happen. But from the first note where everybody was singing out together, it's like, we're here, we've been preserved, we're blessed. That's blessing beyond circumstances.
Absolutely.
And that's what, so I'm glad we got to flesh that out a
little
bit. Another thing that you brought out was the blessing of spiritual community. And so how does that work? Why is that so important? It's a drumbeat that we've been on.
I think there's a, zooming out even a ring further, we talked about how kind of there's this rhythm with God of we are blessed by Him, and then we in turn receive that blessing and then give it. So we're blessed by God, we receive it, and then what we're to do is then to give that out to others. And when we're in community, it creates this awesome cycle that just happens. Where together we live as people that are blessed by God, we receive it, and then we give that blessing to each other. And it's like, I joked, it's like this best never-ending cycle of living blessed. And I think community is such a core element. It's one theme that Paul really reiterates throughout here, which would make sense given the context of, he was with them, like I said, anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. This was probably, under a year or within that time frame, maybe a little longer that he wrote this letter to them, meaning like he was gone from there and he wrote the letter. And by the time Timothy went and visited them and came back and all that. And so there's an element there of him really wanting to make sure that people understand, like, stick together, bond together, be together. Because we can't do this on our own. We just cannot. We absolutely cannot. As followers of Jesus, hear me. I'm not talking salvation. Like the response I'll get sometimes is, "Well, I don't need to go to church to be saved." I'm like, right, you don't.
Sure.
Like you don't. It's just between you and God. But my pushback would be, if you want to deepen your relationship with God and have the best possible chance at a life thriving following Jesus now, you got to be in community. Doesn't have to be even. I even punt. Hear me. I'm obviously for the local church.
Yeah.
But I'll even punt on that. Like, I don't want to be a part of a church. Well, okay, that's fine. I still think that's your best shot. That's fine. But you still got to be involved in community.
Yeah.
You still got to have community people around you that are following God, the same kind of in the same idea sphere that you are.
Yeah.
Because we're toast without it.
Right.
We're toast without it. We cannot do it on our own. We talked during the sermon, like, God himself exists in community. The first crisis of Scripture was loneliness. That was before sin.
It is not good for the man to be alone.
Exactly. Like before sin, the one thing God said was not good is for loneliness. And so there's already this core and the nature of who God is and who God created people to be. That is this massive need for community.
And our culture is crying out for that. Yeah. Like many studies recently, I just read one that if you don't have a community around you, because loneliness is the biggest epidemic in our culture, that it is worse for your health than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Isolation.
Wow.
So like, if you want to grow as a follower of Jesus, if you want to grow as a human being and thrive in this life, you need others around you.
You need it.
And that's where that blessing comes in. I'll just give a personal example. My grandfather's nearing the end of his journey. He's back in Illinois, and I've shared that with all of you. And in teaching team, it was just this beautiful moment where y'all were like, go. Like, if you need to go and spend time with your grandpa, we got this. that's a blessing of community that you don't get when you're out on an island by yourself.
It's all up to you.
Yeah.
It's all up to you.
Yeah. And I absolutely felt that. I know that when that time comes, I can drop whatever's going on and y'all are going to figure it out.
Right.
In that punt.
Absolutely.
That's the blessing that comes from having community around
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's an element of the sermon that I didn't even get into, like, at all. Like, a lot of time we'll go deeper, but this is something I didn't even get to at all. So when you look at this chapter of 1 Thessalonians 3, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's a fifth one, I think, where Paul talks about and uses language around standing firm, strong, strengthened.
Oh yeah, we didn't even get there.
It's all over this chapter.
Yeah.
And so what we see here, I believe, is when we talk about the blessing, we broke kind of this chunk down, the blessing of spiritual community and the blessing of growth. What comes with community and what comes with growth is this ability of when we lean into each of those blessings, when we lean into the people around us and the work God's doing in us, we are now able to stand firm.
Yeah.
There's an extra level of like strength that we can get to. And notice it's not from our own power. Neither of those things are from like, well, Taylor, you need to just grit it out. You need to dig deep. No, it comes from the blessing of other people. Because what does Paul do in the first half of that? Paul says, Timothy, I'm sending you to strengthen the people, to make sure they're standing firm. So it's community. It's Timothy, go and strengthen these people. And then on the back end, it's Paul saying, he is them blessed by seeing them stand firm. And then he prays in this kind of the last few verses, he prays for them, their hearts to be strengthened, their hearts to stand firm. And so it's all over the place in this chapter. And I think that if you had to ask me, I think that when we lean into both of those, the blessing of other people around us to strengthen us, and the blessing of God's work in us, which matures us and grows us up, we are then able to stand firm in ways that we can't imagine. I mean, I shared a little bit about sabbatical and in my experience. I think I look back and go like, yeah, that was a little bit of that. Where I had grown up, I got a lot of growing up to do, but I'd grown up a little bit, and so I think I was able to stand firm in the midst of that. I can think of a couple people right now that are going through really hard times, like really difficult times in their family and kind of in their life. And I talked to a couple of them this weekend at church, like while they were here, and both of them said, "I can't explain it, but I just have this peace. I have this strength. It's not an avoidance. It's not a bury your head in the sand. It's not anything like that. But it's this strength and this kind of resolve of I'm going to make it through, and I'm able to stand firm in my faith. And I believe it's come. If you ask if you ask these people, if you pulled them aside and said, "Where do you think it's come from?" I think both of them would tell you in different ways. It's come from other people around them, and then the maturing work that God has done in them.
Yeah.
Like I think that's where it is.
So I heard an illustration recently about giant redwood trees. Like these trees should not be able to stand as tall as they are. And when wind comes and the reason redwoods stand is they have an interconnected root system. Yeah. Like they're literally drawing strength from one another.
Yeah.
And that's what's balancing one another. So we need the blessings that God gives to us and the work he does in us and through us as we give that to others. But we also need the people around us, because there are moments that I can't stand up on my own.
No.
And the blessing of community is y'all help me to stand up. And when those moments come for you, I'm going to help you stand up. That's what we find in the church. So like to your point, you can make a run at this by yourself. Yeah. But at some point, and in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says the storm is going to come.
Absolutely.
It's going to come.
Yeah, it's just reality.
Yeah. So where are you rooted?
Right.
And who are you interconnected with?
Right. That's a beautiful illustration of the redwoods, and I think that's it. Yeah. That's the picture of what this spiritual community looks like. Yeah. Of its and that requires a depth. So like I talked about this piece too, of like it's different to just like know someone's name. Yeah. And call that community. And like, that's not it. Like what we're talking about requires taking the time to know others and to be known by them. Yeah. And that's like another depth to it.
Absolutely it is.
And there's a fear in that, and there's risk in that. Yeah. And I hear you, and some people listening, and I joked that some people listening on Sunday were like, well, I've tried this whole community thing. I tried a small group. I tried a serving thing, and it didn't work. And you know what? It probably didn't. Right. Because
that's true.
We're all sinful, imperfect people. Yeah. And you know what? I wish I could tell you every community sphere I've entered in my life was a perfect fit right away, and it wasn't. Like, I've had friend groups that I thought was a fit and wasn't. I've had, whether it's joining a gym or joining whatever, like, works for a while and then doesn't. I mean, so this happens, and I'd encourage us to not let 1, 2, 3 results of, community didn't work that time, so I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, keep trying, because God's still working. God's not done.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we have to keep leaning in too, I think.
Yeah. Real quick, for anybody that's listening that just doesn't see blessing around them.
Yeah.
Like, what would you give just as a practical word on how to deepen their awareness of blessing? I think we've laid a pretty solid foundation that you are being blessed.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you deepen that awareness?
Yeah. Yeah. I think taking time to stop and slow down and spend uninterrupted, focused time in the presence of Jesus. It's amazing what busyness and activity will do sometimes to try to help us avoid that time with God. Like, we subconsciously don't even realize we're doing it. So I think that's the first one. I think is we have to slow down, because sometimes we just get stuck in this.
Well, John Mark Comer in Ruthless Elimination of Hurry says we're addicted to hurry.
We are. Absolutely.
We have to break that cycle.
We are, and we're addicted to it. We jump from one thing to another, and it's a mix of, it's a dopamine hit, but it's also an avoidance tactic too. Because we also know that when we sit down with God, we're confronted with, or we might be confronted with, He's going to speak to us about the things that maybe we just don't want to talk about. So I think that's the first thing, is we have to slow down. That's for those of us that are kind of running all over. I'm like, I don't feel blessed. I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels.
Right.
Well, I think we need to slow down and spend time in the presence of Jesus and let Him just be with us. I think that's the first one. The second one is I gave a couple questions in the sermon. I don't know if you guys did this at other campuses, but I gave a couple questions to end. And that was, this is what you said, that was the goal.
Yeah.
You named the goal of it, was to just help you kind of be in awareness of that.
Yeah.
And so the two questions, I'm going to botch the exact wording of these because it's already Wednesday and it's floated into the ether of whatever.
You're trying to pull it back in.
I was trying to like collect it. But the first question it's around, what is God doing through me to bless others? So basically, look at
I think you nailed it verbatim.
Was that it? Oh,
yeah,
sweet.
I think so.
We'll see if I get the next one. The first question, that question was about, so kind of look around you.
Yeah.
So what relationships do you have? Where has God placed you in your workplace? Where has God placed you in your neighborhood? Where has God placed you in your school? Where has God placed you? Who's around you?
Yeah.
And look at the blessings of all those relationships. And it's easy to go, well, I hate my boss, or I hate that. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about who's the coworker that you get to spend time with every day, and you're so excited. And like it's one of those, like, when they're not here, you're like, oh man, he's not here today, or oh, she's not here today.
I told you guys I was coming back after that.
Oh man, he's here. But who is that? So look around you, and you'll begin to see, like, oh wow, there's a blessing of community through this person and that person around me. Second thing is to take time to stop and think, what is the work God's doing in me to grow me?
Right.
So what's a new thing that God's kind of giving you a passion for? What's a maybe holy discontent? That means means you're so passionate about something that you're like, I can't stand that something is this way.
Yeah.
I can't stand that. I just read this say, I can't stand that only 1/3 of elementary age kids are on their reading level, and 2/3 aren't.
Yeah. Yeah, that should raise something.
Like for me, reading that today, getting ready, I'm just in the middle, like just waking up and kind of doing the phone scroll, and like that raised something in me. So what's a holy discontent that you have?
Yeah.
What is a kind of a theme of your life that maybe this has come up 3 times in the past few weeks that you're like, oh man, all those things I would say are indicators of God wanting to do something in you, grow something in you, lead you to a deeper place of maturity. And so instead of resisting that, look at that and go, wow, God is blessing me with a chance to grow. And he's gonna walk with me and assist me in this and help me with this if I cooperate with him. And so I think those two things, for me, it would be slow down. that's for both of those. Slow down, but then also consider who's around you that's God's placed in your life that can is blessing you and you can bless, and what is God doing in you that is an awesome opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
You don't have to fight. You don't have to resist it. You can just say, God, thank you for wanting to grow me and lead me into this place.
Yeah. What a sweet spot that is.
Yeah.
When you can be there.
Yeah.
So, hey, this has been great. We'll be back next week. I think Pastor Wes is up for the Cape campus. So I'll be back with him next week as we continue in these essentials in 1 Thessalonians. Remember the challenge we threw out to read through 1 Thessalonians and the Bible Project video.
Yeah.
There's so much cultural background to Thessalonica that mirrors our own culture in a lot of ways, and we need that background work. So we'll see you next week. Hope you're having a great week. Bye now.
Bye.